So the first demonstration using the Report Server Project Wizard template, when it comes to launching bids, you have two approaches. You can launch it here in Program Files under SQL Server 2008 R2. You could also come down to Visual Studio 2008. In fact, they are the same executable. It's the same integrated development environment. But look at this splash screen that shows us that the last three designers here for analysis, integration, and reporting services are available alongside the .NET development components. Now, this is because I also have Visual Studio 2008 installed on this machine. If I only install bids, I'm only going to see those three designers for SQL Server. File, New Project. Visual Studio works with the concept of problems. You're there to solve a problem. I have a missing report. I have a missing application. So it works with the concept of a solution file that really is a container for multiple projects. So I start with creating a Visual Studio solution, which I'm simply going to call Demo. So I choose the blank solution template. And what we'll see here in my Solution Explorer is I have this empty solution, no projects associated with it. And now I can right-click, and then I can add in new projects to that solution. So it could well be in a data warehouse project that I first add an integration services project to develop packages to perform ETL. And then second, an analysis services project to develop and deploy a cube and some mining models. And then thirdly, a reporting services project, and so on and so on. So here in the Business Intelligence Projects group, I have the different templates available for SQL BI. I'm going to choose the Report Server Project Wizard, and we'll call this my Sales Reports project. And that project then is added to become the first project of my solution. And here is the Report Wizard. And now this is going to guide us through the process of defining where our data comes from. So the first step in the wizard says select your data source. So the drop-down list here delivers to us the different providers we've already talked about. So I'm going to leave it with SQL Server. I'll click Edit to build up the connection string. So I'm going to connect to my local host and the AdventureWorks data warehouse. It's always ideal to test the connection at this point. And it then copies the connection string into this box for me. Now, an important concept is that data sources are often reused. We don't usually write one report per data source, we write multiple reports per data source. So this concept of creating a data source that is shared and reused is an important design concept, and will support better maintainability as it needs to be maintained. For example, if we relocate that data warehouse to another server, we only need to change one object, not every report that would have an embedded connection string. So I check this checkbox to say, make this a shared data source. Next, I have the opportunity to build up a query. So I've already got a query built here. I'm going to go ahead and just write it in. I've got some unusual behavior going on here. There we go. Select all columns from. And I have this view called Report Salesperson Summary. How do I know this? Well, either I wrote the view or the DBA told me, copy this into the wizard. We'll explore creating queries later on. And it says, hold on a minute, invalid object name. So I've either got that wrong or I've misspelled it, I think. There we go. Now, the next choice in the wizard says, well, we're going to produce a grid report. Is it a table or a matrix? And a table is defined as a grid that has fixed columns, whereas a matrix can have dynamic columns driven by your data itself. In this example, I'm going to create a matrix, and the next step of the wizard then allows me to take the fields that are returned by that query and assign them to become page, column, row, or detail layouts within the report. So I'm going to put the group at page level that says each group, Europe, North America, Pacific, will create a new page. And then I'd like to see year, and I multi-select quarter, and I want them placed on the columns. So there's my dynamic columns of the matrix. Then let's place the region and the employee name on the rows. and then finally the sales amount into the details. And that's constructed the layout of my matrix. Down here, this checkbox allows me to introduce interactivity with a drill down feature. Let's turn that on. Next, there are some styles to choose from. My favorite is the corporate. We'll click next. And then to support the deployment, so the report server project allows you to deploy its content direct to the report server. It wants to know the version and the URL to get to that service. And the defaults here are perfectly fine. The folder that it will deploy to inherits from the project name, and you can change that. And I'm happy to leave it as the sales reports. When I click next, I get a summary of what's going to be produced. I'm going to provide a report that's called Salesperson Summary Wizard. And I click Finish. And note here on the right side in Solution Explorer the addition of a data source and the report to the project. Okay. I missed a step there in the wizard. I really should have named that something better than Data Source 1. My approach is to name it the name of the database. So it's very clear that this data source connects to that data warehouse. And then I have the report here. So it opens up the report for me in the Report Designer, which consists of those two tabs, Design and Preview. So do I want to make changes? Yes, there's one thing. I want to select this box, which is the sales amount, and I right-click, come to Text Box Properties, and very much like working in Excel, I can format this cell to say the number is no decimal places, but use the thousand separator. And also I recognize that my employee names are quite wide, so I just want to widen this a little bit. And then I switch across to Preview. And with little effort, and because I named that incorrectly, we modify that data source. Because I renamed it in the project, I disconnected it from the report. So excuse me, we will look at that in more detail shortly. Now, with little effort, I can show you. Wizard guidance, a little bit of formatting. I now have this drill down report broken down by group. So there's Europe. Let's navigate to the second page. We have NA, we have North America, and then I can drill down within a region to see the employees, and within the years to see the quarters. So once you've completed and tested your design, the approach you can take then is to right-click the project and deploy it. And because it knows the location of your report server, we can see here in the output window that it's deploying the content to the server. Let me switch across to my report manager, and here in the sales reports folder we now see the addition of the Salesperson Summary Wizard. So this is now available to anybody that has permission to connect to the report server and browse the content of this sales reports folder. This report is now public. Let me just point out to you the functionality here. Across the toolbar in the report viewer you can navigate between pages. This is somewhat curious. Why do we have this question mark? Does it not know how many pages there are in this report? Well, the fact is it doesn't. This is an optimization that says, in order to return the report response as quickly as possible to the client, rather than render the entire report from first page to last, let's just push out the first page. Potentially there are more pages. If you need to know, you simply navigate to the last page, and we can then see that there are actually 5 pages. Right, so that's just an optimization that says let's just get the report as quickly as possible to the client without rendering the entire report. Next, we can change the zoom. We can search for text values across the report. We can export to the other rendering formats. We can reload, which effectively re-requests the data and re-renders the report. And we can print from the browser. And finally, for the atom rendering, to deliver a feed of data, we can then request that from here. So that's the fast way, but I'll be honest with you, I would never use that wizard in reality. It's great for demonstrations, it's great for prototypes, but the reality is, if you want to produce the report that you have in mind, the skills that you'll have at the end of today will be sufficient to build it up from scratch. All right, so I think it's great perhaps to familiarize yourself with what reporting services does, but I would never rely on that wizard beyond demonstrations from this point forward. So the